Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm Washington State government reporter for the Center Square, Carlene Johnson, along with our Center Square correspondent, Tim Klauser, who has been following some of the legislation in this current session that has to do with kind of attempts by the Democratic majority to restrict immigration and customs enforcement officers in the state of Washington. All this, of course, related to what's been happening in Minneapolis and now other states that are seeing some ICE operations, including here in Washington state. So, all right, tell me what happened on the Senate floor Wednesday in big progress forward for one of these pieces of legislation concerning ICE officers.
Yeah, well, we heard Governor Ferguson say at the beginning of this month when he gave the State of the State address that he was in full support of the majority's proposal to ban all law enforcement, that's state, local, tribal, and federal law enforcement, from wearing masks amid a lot of the ICE activity going on nationwide, while at the same time, a lot of these agents are being doxxed and having their families harassed. So this bill reached the Senate floor on Wednesday. It was one of their first orders of business after they did some more ceremonial resolutions. It was a party line vote. You saw every Republican vote against it and every Democrat vote for it, as expected. Notably, there was a few Republicans that said that they couldn't argue against some of the criticism offered by the majority party. But ultimately, we saw everyone push back against it in terms of voting. But it does come amid, Governor Ferguson, he held a press conference earlier this week amid a leaked memo from ICE saying that the administration is saying you don't need a judicial warrant. You can rely on these administrative warrants to conduct raids. Ferguson held a press conference in response to this earlier this week, reaffirmed his support and said, look, if you see ICE activity that's concerning, we want you to report that. And this comes at the same time as groups across the country are reporting ICE activity to get protesters out there to try to impede them. And just in the last few weeks, we've seen this happen in Seattle, where fake reports were made and several schools went into shelter in place protocols, essentially a step not as far as a full on lockdown, but they went into shelter in place because of nearby ICE activity that wasn't confirmed. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. But I just want to clarify, because we have a number of bills, right? So the one that passed off of the Senate floor on Wednesday after some pretty passionate debate and amendments that were all rejected, right, offered by Republicans. This was Senate Bill 5855. This is the one that has to do with masks on ICE officers. So explain how this would work, assuming this becomes law, or if it's even going to be enforceable.
Yeah, well, the Senate passed it. It goes to the House now, so they have to pass it. But assuming that they do and that there's no amendments, it pretty much does exactly what I said. It would stop or try to stop state, federal, and local law enforcement from wearing masks in public. So they would have to be clearly identifiable, which, okay, but then you have this issue of doxing that's going on. ICE is putting out, DHS is putting out this data saying that they've had massive, tenfold increases in assaults on officers and death threats of vehicular assault. So there is a notable issue there. And I think it also begs the question as to, you don't want these immigration officers wearing masks that they claim is in an effort to protect themselves from being doxxed. But at the same time, in a lot of these counter protests, you see the protesters themselves wearing masks. Hard to weigh the two.
I appreciated some of the, I was watching the same floor debate that you were covering on Wednesday, Tim, and some of the passionate, amendments and then statements made on the floor ahead of the final vote, especially from Senator Phil Fortunato, who walked off into the wings of the Senate and said, I did what I could. That's all I can do. And I think they know they're powerless to stop some of this, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they feel it's hugely important to say, why are we putting so much focus on this federal issue? Yeah. When it might not even be enforceable, because we've got the supremacy clause with these federal agents. It would seem here in Washington, if they decide to protect themselves and cover their faces for enforcement operations, I'm not sure there's any law enforcement mechanism here in the state of Washington that can stop that.
Yeah, and that's what the minority party, all the Republicans said over and over again yesterday or on Wednesday was that, look, there is such thing as federal supremacy. Immigration is in the hands of the federal government. You can disagree all you want with the way that the administration is carrying it out. And we heard several lawmakers, I think one or two on the Republican side as well, speak out against that. But at the same time, it's not the state legislature's place to legislate this issue. They have to leave it to the federal government. And in terms of mass, I mean, you spoke to Fortunato's testimony yesterday, or his statements on the Senate floor. I mean, it's true that officers are also facing an increase in threats, in that the masking is to protect themselves and their family. You can have disagreements with the way that the administration is carrying out immigration enforcement. Okay, you're entitled to your own opinions. But at the same time, there are people being doxxed. There are people and their families and their kids being targeted. And that's something that needs to be addressed too.
Absolutely. I know you have written on a couple of bills that I covered a hearing on Thursday, 2 more ICE-related bills that came up in the House Public Safety Committee. One of them from Representative Tara Simmons, that bill, which you had written about as well, basically says if you've been an ICE officer if you've joined ICE after January 20th, 2025, the second Trump administration, if you decide to join ICE at that point, you can never be a Washington state law enforcement officer. And the suggestion being, if you're dumb enough, I think that was one of the words that I heard used in the hearing on Thursday, to want to join and be an ICE officer in the current climate, we don't want anything to do with you here in the state of Washington. I would like you to unpack that a little bit, because you wrote about this bill before I covered the hearing on Thursday.
Yeah, well, I'd have to go back and revisit all the legal nuances around it. But essentially, the courts have reaffirmed that states, governments can reject job applicants based on their prior work history. But it does raise the question, I mean, is this political discrimination? I mean, they've got a specific date in there when Trump's second term started. And okay, have your disagreements at the same time. But who are you to pick and choose who the state gets to discriminate against and for what reason? It raises issues. And at the same time, I mean, how many people served underneath the first Trump administration or during the Biden administration and continued to be in ICE after January 20th? This bill doesn't account for all those people that served in Trump's first term or served under Biden and have no problems leaving ICE today. So the bill doesn't include them. It specifically targets one set of people.
Yes, and it certainly does seem, you just raised the discrimination argument, which was brought up in the hearing on Thursday. Here you had Representative Brian Burnett, who's a member of that House Community Safety Committee, longtime sheriff in Chelan County. And he said, wait a minute, if we're trying to sort of weed out any, bad actors here, people that maybe joined ICE with the wrong intentions, and maybe they're criminals, or he said, maybe we need to broaden the scope of the way we look at, background checks or anything for law enforcement in general in the state of Washington. At the same time, other members said we have these, lots of assurances in our background check system for law enforcement that preclude a lot of these bad actors. But it's an interesting argument. And I think it is relevant to bring up the fact that, as you did in your article, and I did in my follow-up, that Representative Simmons was herself a convicted felon. Her record was expunged due to some changes in state law. And she's always championing, everybody can renew themselves, and, we can look past ills of the past, if you will, and let people reinvent themselves. And yet here she is saying, if you ever worked for ICE, you're a bad actor. We don't want you.
Yeah. Well, let's just stop for a second here. Politics completely aside, the real issue here with this bill is that Washington state, year after year, ranks last, 51st nationwide, behind Washington, D.C. for law enforcement officers per capita. And the state last year tried to put $100 million behind this new tax program that would help fund these officers, maybe. And now they're proposing a bill like this that would limit the recruitment pool. I mean, those are valid concerns coming from Republicans. I mean, this is an issue, a bipartisan issue that has had a lot of attention in the last few years. And this bill would throw a stick in that wheel.
Yeah, it's infuriating, I think, for minority members in the committee and, of course, in the floor action that took place on Wednesday, raising some, it seems to be pretty valid points that a lot of people in the community are saying. You can, like you said, you can agree or not with the ICE actions in Minneapolis and some of the other things that, maybe need to be addressed. But at the same time, when you're going to limit the pool of available applicants for Washington state law enforcement, if they worked for ICE post January 2025, you're perhaps excluding some people that, might want to come here and work in policing, and darn, we need them.
Yeah. And I'm all for independent investigations into all the alleged wrongdoings on both sides. But I think the rhetoric, again, on both sides needs to be tamed down, and we need to focus on state issues. We need to focus on the state's multi-billion-dollar deficit, addressing these issues, not the constant political tensions that come up and down with each administration.
There is so much time in this session. And as we speak, where I think we're on day 18 of the 60-day session, it already feels like it's been months, if you ask me, but I know some members feel the same way.
Trump's in office for a few more years, so we're going to have a few more sessions of dealing with the administration. So, me and you will be coming the whole way, Carl.
I know. I appreciate you keeping tabs on everything happening in Olympia, Tim. So I would direct folks watching this or our readers with the Center Square to our website at thecentersquare.com/Washington. Tim's been writing quite a bit about some of these bills related to ICE enforcement restrictions, as have I. So you'll find all those articles there, and we'll continue to be on top of it. Tim, thank you for following this so closely. I know it's something that folks that follow us care a heck of a lot about. So this is, for now, been another episode of Washington in Focus. Along with Tim Clouser, I'm Carlene Johnson. Thanks for watching.